All right. So we have a few folks rolling in, and we might just give it a couple minutes, Andy, and I'm just trying to see who else we have on here, just to kind of see if we can't get a couple more people to Anna to come in from the community specifically. And then just give it a couple more minutes, and then we'll at least get started with our introductions. And we could actually, you could even introduce yourselves, given that we don't have too many people yet.
Bueno, vamos a dar inicio al programa en unos cuantos minutos. Vamos a darle la oportunidad a más personas que se nos unan esta noche. Y quizás podemos comenzar con las presentaciones y de esa manera no tendremos que esperar por eso.
All right. Well, okay. I'd say we probably should get started, and we'll see if we get a few more folks to roll in. So tonight we're here at the West Area Program of Projects. We'll kind of fill you in on our new name, West Area, not West Colfax. But and I'm going to just launch us into the first part of this. I'm Beth Vogelsang, and I'm with OB Consulting, and Anthony Aragon has moved on to his new position at National Western. So I'm supporting this effort, and have some other folks here on the call who we'll be introducing here shortly. So we do always offer language interpretation. And so here's our standard directions. They're the same each time, but you need to click on the interpretation button that you see and choose the language of your choice. And we'll give everybody a few minutes. And Francisco, if you want to go ahead, explain that as well, that'd be great.
Gracias, Beth. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a esta sesión. Vamos a comenzar esta reunión de nuestras reuniones que con nuevo título. Ahora nos llamamos el área oeste en vez del área del oeste de la Colfax. Y como ustedes saben, mi nombre es Beth Vogelsang y como ustedes saben, Anthony Aragón ahora se ha ido al Centro National Western y vamos a presentar a nuestros otros oradores esta noche. Y como saben, nuestras reuniones siempre son bilingües. Siempre proveemos interpretación al español y vamos a dar una explicación acerca de cómo conectarse, como muchos de ustedes saben. Si hacen el favor de pulsar el icono de la interpretación en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccionan el idioma de su preferencia.
All right. Okay, everybody choose. And then, of course, we just always have our standard reminders, but remember to turn off or mute your noise if you can, if you're not speaking, or if your house is noisy. And then please use the chat as well. So we have folks who'll be watching chat, so we can certainly raise questions through that or raise your little hand. So all is good. So it's a small group, so just feel free to engage, no problem. And with that, I want to just introduce our agenda. And I also want to introduce everyone. We're going to be covering two projects tonight, 17th Avenue and Stuart Street Stormwater Project. But I want to introduce you to Rebecca Draper, who is with OCBE and who is stepping in for Anthony from OCBE. And I'll let her say a few words. Rebecca?
Yeah, thank you, Beth. As Beth just mentioned, I'm Rebecca Draper, and I'm the manager of the Office of Community and Business Engagement. So I actually am extremely honored to step into Anthony's shoes, even though it will be transitional and interim shoe filling. We're in the process of looking for, I guess, kind of just the right superstar to fill Anthony's shoes, but that will take a little while, probably no less than 3 months. So I'm going to get a lot of chance to be with you and be more immersed in the community. I've had the pleasure of being Anthony's direct supervisor for the past year. I actually had my 1-year anniversary with Dottie just yesterday. And I'm new to Denver, have been here a year, but I've long had passion for working closely with communities and really through a shared leadership model, just like is represented by this advisory group. So I held a very similar position to Anthony's for 10 years and then acted as a supervisor to a team of maybe not Anthony's, but Anthony wannabes for another 10 years in California. So I think really my pledge to this group is we want to ensure that OCBE maintains the really high level of consistency in both communications and responsiveness with your group as we move through a period of some transition. And I think the fact that we have Beth with OV and Catherine Archuleta, although she couldn't be here tonight, she's coming back, that's for sure. But that we have them as a part of our team really helps me, and I think all of us, to know that we're in such good hands. But I just really want to say, feel free to reach out to me at any time with questions, concerns, suggestions. I'll put my information in the chat and just really feel free to use it. I also wanted to mention that currently the monthly meeting invites did get switched to Tim Sandos, who's our executive director at OCBE, but we're going to shift those to me after this meeting. So you'll see another meeting invite come through fairly soon, just so it can switch over under my sort of control. And our thought at this point for August is that we will forgo the August CAG meeting. It's such a tough time. And I think tonight we have sort of a very small group. And I think that's representative of summertime and other, sort of things that are on our plate to do. And I think August is particularly difficult with back to school, end of summer vacations, that sort of thing. So we're planning on not holding the August CAG meeting, but really preparing for an in-person September community-wide meeting. So that's what our plan is at this point. But certainly, if you have any concerns about that, feel free to let us know. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. We have a raised hand there with Andy.
Hi, thank you so much, Rebecca. I was just wondering, pursuant, there's a new name now of the kind of group. I was wondering then if that means like the scope of the projects and some of the sort of information that is going to be presented kind of, if that has changed too.
That's a beautiful question, and actually our next slide. So, and I think Beth can talk a little bit more about the projects, but I can talk a little bit about sort of how we've expanded the boundaries. And again, that's more reflective of a change in the name from West Colfax to West Area CAG as well. So the change is really only one change, and that's moving the southern border from 6th Ave all the way down to Alameda. And the reason behind that was to be as inclusive as possible in terms both of the neighborhood residents and businesses that will be impacted by upcoming projects in this entire area. Some of these projects have more sort of impact than simply 6th Avenue. So these communities, Barnum West, Barnum, and Valverde, we felt it was important to include them. All the other borders are staying the same. So Sheridan to the west, the north being 20th, and then the South Platte to the east. And what OCBE is doing right now is actually Chris on our team, who's on the call today, is reviewing that entire expansion area from 6th down to Alameda to really ensure that we're identifying the RNOs and various community-based organizations that we can engage at the CAG level and also for, you know, the larger scale community-wide meetings. And again, really our goal is inclusivity and maintaining representative participation across the entire West area boundaries. So that's it in terms of specific projects. I know, Beth, you were in the process of identifying what ones would be included. And I don't know where you are with that exercise, but maybe.
Yeah, I think, you know, they're all the same projects that we have included prior to this. And I think that as we had started this, there was such an emphasis on West Colfax because it was just getting underway. And I think as we've matured here over this time, we've really noticed that there's a lot of other things going on. And the West Area Neighborhood Plan is the same boundary to Alameda Avenue. And so that way we can be inclusive of all those study efforts that are going on and kind of all be on the same page with where things are. There's also quite a bit of work coming that's along the river. And a lot of this area along the river is really important. And so this way too, we're just positioned for a more cohesive conversation about the whole area. So that's sort of the rationale to that. And next time we'll come with more updates on all of the projects maybe listed to what we are currently including. But for tonight, we thought we might just keep it to hey, we're actually changing the name and including the whole area conversation.
Andy, does that help?
It certainly does. And thank you so much. Yeah, as soon as I saw West area, I thought, is this kind of the same geographic boundaries as the plan? Do you take requests for projects? I mean, of
Sure.
course, certain
yeah.
projects the city knows that we don't, but is it just easier to put stuff like that in the chat?
That's great. Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, any neighborhood efforts or things, you know, that we just maybe aren't on top of, that's fabulous.
That would be great. And I think that wraps up my comments on that. But if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out. And so at this point, we're gonna shift to Karen Good, which I know you're all very familiar with Karen. She's gonna give an update on the 17th Ave Bikeway tonight.
And thanks so much, Rebecca. And I have a ridiculous number of slides, but many of which are repeats of things that you all have seen before. So I am going to really breeze through some of the project background. Andy, I can see you, and so you can flail about, and I will notice that. If anyone else has a question and would like me to stop, because I just, for some reason, Andy, you're showing up in my top 5 here. So feel free to flail about and I'll notice that and stop. But if anyone else has any questions on the first piece or anything, please just give a holler. I'll stop or go back or whatever we need to do. So that's my plan. And Beth, let's get rolling. Project team, I am from the community design team. The rest of our project team is not here today, but it includes a wonderful bunch of folks, Steve, Allison, and Taylor, some of whom you may have seen at, Allison was at both of our pop-ups in March at Odell's Brewing Company, and in the month that just passed, June, along Sloan's Lake Park, across from Odell's and Company, just on the trail. And again, I bet you all have seen this slide about 20 times. We are really working to move people more safely and efficiently. And one of our big means of doing that is providing people more choice. And Beth, let's breeze through. These are additional slides about our Vision Zero program that ties into getting more people out of their cars, and not giving up their car, but balancing their use of the system and providing opportunities for people to feel more comfortable, maybe just running a couple errands a week by foot or by bike. And one of our great ways to do that is to look at means of increasing those multimodal projects and how we can get some more bike lane miles as we work across the city in lots of different projects. And I believe our next slide talks a little bit about overall right of way. And I'm holding out for the next slide. It's one of the next 10 slides that talks about how many people are willing and interested in biking, but not really comfortable. That's 75% of people who would potentially ride a bike if they felt more comfortable. So we look at, next slide, Beth, we look at opportunities to build on our past planning efforts, including Denver Moves Bikes, Denver Right. We're doing all sorts of good things. And one of the ways that we look at trying to be efficient in building out our multimodal network is doing some of that build out with existing projects that we have. The city does a lot of lane miles each summer in that paving season, 400 to 500 miles. So we look at what our paving map is that's based on little fun things like condition of pavement. We look at what's planned to be paved in the next year, and we identify areas where they're part of the existing bike network, and then take a deeper dive in seeing what we can do. Do we replace the facility as is? Can we upgrade the facility? Is there anything else that we need to think about? So next slide. We are also looking at, there's lots of other means of doing improvements, from our Safe Routes to School program to our Signal program, et cetera. Next slide. We've talked about the other projects in this area. As we mentioned, we changed this from the West Colfax to the West area plan, but you all, I think, are pretty up to speed on some of the other projects in the area. And we're going to try to zoom through and dive into 17th. We are really at 100% design. So again, you're going to see some of the existing conditions, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. Our project area is from Federal to Sheridan on 17th. We've had lots of one-on-one meetings with folks in our office hours, as well as those pop-ups in the past couple months that I mentioned. So we've got a lot going on. And then, as many of you are aware, as you go down 17th or up 17th, depending on which direction you're going, there are really several different cross sections, whether there's the west end that has the existing bike facility to the east end that is Sharrow's currently. So we look at all of that, and I'm just going to pop through, Beth, so we can hopefully meet to Julian. That's where we have no protection. We have those Sharrows and parking. And then in the final section, Julian to Federal, we have Sharrows and no parking. So fairly short segment, but 3 different cross sections within that. And that leads to some different cross sections of what we can do. We look at, we're again making database decisions. So we look at the speeds, and we look at the volumes, and we look at crashes. So the big summary is that the west end has higher volumes, the east end has lower volumes, and that speaks to what type of facility we'll have. I believe we've got a little bit of a description and chart on the next slide. Oh, no, go into the crashes. Sorry, this is all in my head. We have crashes spread out over the corridor. They're not all clustered in one area. So that lets us know that we'd like to make improvements across this whole segment of 17th. There's not one problem area where we can really focus in our efforts, and this one spot is the problem. It's the corridor as a whole, with vehicle crashes, pedestrian crashes, and bike crashes. So our next slide talks a little bit about parking. As you saw in our different cross sections, some areas have parking on one side of the street, some have no parking, some have parking on both sides of the street. So for making changes to bike network, often that involves trade-offs with parking. So we wanted to get a good feel for what the parking utilization is. The East End, as you can see with the black line closest to Federal, there's no parking, so there's no parking. The west segment where you see green at the top there, thanks Beth, has very low utilization, obviously for big events like Dragon Boat, etc. Things are going to be parked up, but we look at more typical, and we did include a weekend as well, Thursday and a Saturday. Low utilization there, and that little chunk in the middle by Odell's and in that Lowell to Julian section have some greater utilization. Hop into our next slide. We used all of that information to, along with this handy dandy little chart that takes our speeds and our volumes and informs, in an ideal world, what kind of bike facility we would want to have. The West End, as I said, has higher volumes and about the same typical speed. So that recommends a separated bike lane or a shared use path. And then the East End, lower volumes, a bike lane with a buffer preferred. So that gives you a little bit of the analysis and background of how we got to where we are. And then I believe we are, yay, to what we're doing. So at the West End, with those higher volumes where that buffer is recommended, we are able to include a buffer. There is the trade-off. We do need to remove parking in order to provide that buffer, but it will look like 23rd in that section between Stuart and Sheridan. And I'm pretty excited. We get to put some markings across Sheridan to guide folks across the street, and Edgewater will be planning on some receiving facilities within the next year. Those will likely be Sharrows, the shared lane arrow that we have at the east end of 17th currently in Denver, but we're really excited about the opportunity that Edgewater has been a great partner. They're working on some visualization and some visioning for improving Sheridan. We were able to talk to them about the possibility of, we'd like to put some connections to the Edgewater Marketplace and Edgewater Market. So they'll be doing Sharrows, fingers crossed, next year, up 17th to Depew, and then down Depew to Edgewater Market. So it'll get you to the Edgewater Marketplace and then to the Edgewater Market, unless I'm transposing those names, but King Soopers, Target, Ace, etc., and then to the market, open air market, and Shake Shack. So I think that's super exciting. One might, but I do. And the final condition, if anyone has been down 23rd, we have those vertical separators and curbs. That's what we're looking at incorporating here in this section. Thanks, Beth. Sorry to go back. Then we have this middle section, essentially from Stuart to Osceola, where we will, there is tucked in parking. We'll have bike lane on each side, and that tucked in parking on the south side of the street will be retained. That tucked in parking generally has bulb outs around it, so you still have a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what is going on right there. And then our last, then we have a little segment of protected bike lanes, 2 travel lanes. And again, going back to that protected bike lanes that we have at the West End, and that's essentially between Julian and Osceola. And then we bop back to our really constrained area where there's no parking already, so we can't remove parking. And this is, as you remember, this is a project that is being facilitated through our paving. We're not doing a full rebuild of the street. We're not moving curb and gutter. We're just repaving the street and able to do these upgrades to our bike facility through the repaving program. So we will be tucking in a bike lane in each direction in place of those Sharrows, the shared lane situation that we have now. So that's the big picture. And I'm going to pause for a second. We do also have bike improvements, including a Little pedestrian median at Wolf. And we'll be looking at green conflict markings, new crosswalk at Newton, and a new stop sign at Julian, four-way stop there. So there's a lot of, this isn't just about bike improvements, but also pedestrian improvements. So that is, that's the big picture. I'm going to pause for a minute and then dive into our timelines a little bit. But does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Karen, you said there was going to be a pedestrian refuge. Where was that again?
Wolf. So Wolf, closer to the West End. So 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks in there. That has, as you can kind of see, the biggest gap between stop signs. And that's where we're going to do a ped refuge island and crossing facility there. There will not be a signal, but that is a separate project, but we're doing it at the same-ish time. So you'll be seeing a lot of things happening there.
And then kind of a bigger picture question. What's sometimes in different things you'll see the like bollards and like and stuff like that described as like quick build material, and then they kind of say, you know, we'll evaluate how that works if there's things that we need to change. Like does everything get hardened eventually? You know, do you come back in 3 years and say, actually, it's working totally fine right now, we could give it another 3 years? Kind of what does that look like further down?
That's a great question. And I don't think I have a very great answer for you. It's something that we are constantly evaluating. We're just really putting a lot of these facilities in bulk, I would say now. We've had some in our downtown area that have been in place, but we had a little pandemic. So people have been using our systems in very different ways. And I'd say we have sort of a new paradigm that we're working in. So we are constantly evaluating. If you see, let's say everything's installed and you see one of our vertical separators down, please call 311. If one of our curb stops has been is kittywampus and blocking the bike lane or the driving lane, again, please call 311. We monitor these things as much as possible, but we're not everywhere all the time. And in terms of hardening, that's something that we're looking at sort of system-wide, like which of these should we be hardening? All of them? What would that take? We're trying to really build out that network in the most efficient way, and with some of our lower cost materials, and determine it, you know, it may be that we determine some of the materials we use now are great in some of our facilities and should stay just like that. Maybe they all need to be hardened. We don't have those answers. And it's something that we are constantly monitoring and looking at, but I don't have a timeline of, oh, once a facility has been in for X number of years, we'll do a full evaluation and determine whether it gets, you know, updated, hardened, replaced. And we're always looking at new materials, as you may be aware, like some of the materials we're using now weren't around 5 years ago. So, or at least not used in the applications that we're being used in currently. So this is a constant evolution.
Hey, Karen, Heidi has her hand.
Yeah,
up.
I was just seeing that, Heidi, but I did want to ask Andy, does that answer your question?
It does. And, you know, of course, it's always tough when it's kind of a decision to be made down the road, but thank you very much. It gives some context.
Great. Heidi, nice to see you.
Hello. Cool. So I just had a couple questions. I know we talked about this before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. The Tennyson, how that comes up north and then takes that jog on 16th and then connects over. I'm wondering how realistic that is for a bike to get up to 16th and just have the lake in their crosshairs and then to take a left and a right. And I know it's probably, I'm guessing, designed because there's those cut throughs and it's easier to make the cars or the bikes make that jog. And there's a plan for possibly a roundabout at that 16th and Utica. But to me, it is more bike infrastructure if it works with what people are really going to do. And if it's a curb cut or another stop sign that's needed at Tennyson and 17th, then maybe that's what happens to support bike infrastructure. And the second question is just around Irving and 17th. I was surprised to see that there wasn't more, and maybe I'm just was reading the information incorrectly about accidents. And I mean, it's such a dangerous intersection, and I'm pretty sure we've all seen the video, at least you all may have. And I'm just wondering while we're doing all this, what plans are being thought through to protect that intersection more from high speed drive-throughs and the accidents and the craziness that happens there.
Sure. Well, thanks, Heidi. So to your first question, I'm sorry, but I don't have, I was not particularly involved in the Tennyson bike facility, so I can't speak to that. We certainly can share that information with the team. And I believe you have shared that with them before. No, I don't see your face because you're off video, so I can't see if you're nodding. But we certainly can share that, but I cannot speak to that because I was not involved in that design. So, oh, no, I got your face, so I can see you now.
Yeah, no, I know that we've had this conversation, and I bring this up a little bit, and just for some context is because that I think that moving towards more multimodal infrastructure really does require really thinking about the infrastructure from the place of the multimodal and not from the place of the car or what's most convenient. So thank you.
Absolutely. And for Irving, it already is a four-way stop, which is really one of the safest things that we can have, from a speed control. And we have, yes, I've seen so many lovely things that people do at stop signs, at signals, the compliance factor. But one thing that we're doing with 17th as a whole, by buffering bike lanes, by putting bike lanes in, it really changes the dynamic of the driver, and the street really does feel much more narrow. It's the same width. We're not touching the curbs, but we're doing a lot of things from a design standpoint between those buffered bike lane, the two sections of buffered bike lanes, and the bike lane sections that really change the dynamic of the street and how it feels for drivers. So that is one thing. And obviously the police department is very aware of that concern and those issues. And, it's not that, oh, we'll put in a four-way stop, because there is a four-way stop and this is a stop controlled corridor between Federal and Sheridan, and there are a lot of things that folks, well, what if we put a signal in? Often when you do have a signal, people are speeding to get through a yellow. So that's why in a neighborhood context, you often have a four-way stop where everyone has to stop, and compliance issues are challenging. But across board, the design of 17th as a whole is changing fairly dramatically. And we do think that will help support people's increased awareness and compliance. And that's something that we will monitor as well.
Okay.
And Heidi,
yeah.
does that answer? Well, I can't answer your first question, but does that answer the Irving question?
Well, I guess we shall see. But I was just thinking bulb outs or more trees or just anything to just shrink it up. And I understand that the bike lanes and that will help, and getting rid of the sharrow and having
Actual painted bike lanes.
Yeah. And we can't have those be protected. There's not enough room. Is that
correct? If we bought back, Beth, to the existing condition slide, if you could. Sorry, it's a bit of a bop.
This one is not so bad.
Okay.
I'll go.
Sorry.
And then I'm going to ask you to keep going, Karen? Because
Yeah.
we do want to give Lauren time as well.
Yeah, so, sorry. So our existing cross-section at that Federal to Julian, all we have are 2 travel lanes. There's no parking to remove.
And how wide are I'm sorry, how
They're
wide?
15 feet
They're 15.
each.
So you,
So we go down to a 10-foot travel lane and a 5-foot bike lane. And part of that bike lane is really kind of in that curb and gutter area. So we just don't have an inch extra. So Beth, I think I'm just going to talk through our next steps. I don't really need the slides for those. Our big picture is that some of you may have seen, hopefully, or maybe seeing next week, some initial work on curb ramps on the corridor. And then we are looking to start the repaving right after the Dragon Boat Festival. So Monday, the 25th, those operations will take a couple weeks depending on weather. And guess what? We are not you don't go straight from paving to bike lanes installed. The whole project will take probably about 2 months. So if you see that the paving is done and bike lanes aren't installed, I promise we did not forget. We know what we're planning to do. It's just different crews and they're working on this all across the city. And then if you see the bike lanes in without any markings and without any buffers, again, I promise we didn't forget. We're not going back on our promise. It just, those materials and they're different crews, and sometimes we have to wait for materials, and we're doing a lot of work across the city with sort of some of the same contractors and project teams. So it will take a while. There are a couple different stages to getting that wrapped up. So I promise if you see something missing, if it's not that we've forgotten, it's just that it hasn't happened yet. But the paving work and the bulk of the work will be complete prior to school opening. As Rebecca said, there's a lot going on in August. School opens on the 22nd. So the bulk of the things, in particular, I have put a red alert on those crosswalks, in particular by the schools being in prior to school starting. So that is our focus. Any questions on timeline or any of the details around? And we'll be putting out flyers in advance of the paving, and we do have flyers that just, I think, got approved today that are going out on the bikeway as well.
Great. Okay, so I don't see any more questions or hands. Karen, I'm just going to swing on through those slides. Your comments have informed this project.
Yep, we've gotten a lot of feedback.
Many of the comments.
I shared a lot of this, so I've
This is
a lot
a
of
good
it.
one.
Yeah,
It visually
that's-
narrows the lanes to slow things up and to give you different cues. So
Yeah.
she's right. It should have a really big impact.
Yeah, and I did mention that we're going to have markings across Sheridan. We also will have markings across Federal. So really, and that design is finishing like this minute. So everything is happening now.
Great. Okay, stay involved, stay tuned, and on we go.
Thanks so
Move
much.
us forward. Thanks, Karen. All right, I want to introduce Lauren Winnan, and she is the manager of the Stuart Street Storm Project. So I know we want to get this one in this evening. So
Yeah.
Take it from there, Lauren.
Thank you, Beth. Like Beth said, I'm with the city. I am the project manager for the Stuart Street Stormwater Project. This is part of the Antero Peak General Storm package. And so what we do is we package all our smaller storm system improvements into these mountain packages so that we can put several projects out to bid and get better prices on them, and just include a bunch of little different projects all together. So if you see like on the website, this will be listed under Antero Peak General Storm. So just like Karen said, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. I'll look for waving or a hands up or anything. So this is a new storm sewer system along Stuart Street from Colfax to Dry Gulch. It will intercept flows from an existing system in Colfax and then take them to an outfall in Dry Gulch. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. So this is kind of a blow up of what all is involved in the project. Starting on the south end at the Gulch, there will be some water quality enhancements, and those will just look like some open channel swales along either side of Stuart Street, just south of Wells. And we'll kind of get into, there's another slide that gets into a little bit more what that looks like. And then there'll be an outfall to the Gulch. This is a 48-inch pipe. So it's pretty big. There'll be new manholes and inlets in the street. So you won't, this will all be underground. There won't be anything you will see in Stuart Street other than maybe some additional inlets on the sides of the road. But as part of the project, we will be repaving the entire street. We'll be adding in there's like 2 houses that are missing a sidewalk on just north of 13th. We're adding in the sidewalk to connect it. Yeah, we'll repave, we'll reestablish that curb and gutter. And then there will be some work on the south side of Colfax. We'll be updating those curb ramps. Next slide. So this shows the work on the south side of Colfax. These 2 pictures are the existing curb ramps, and we'll be adding in directional curb ramps. So they'll direct traffic across Colfax and also across Stuart. And so you might be thinking that might be dangerous to cross Colfax right there without a light, but there's another project coming in after ours, the Colfax Ped and Transit project, that'll be adding in the median. So there will be a little refuge in the middle of Colfax that pedestrians can cross to. And again, that's part of a separate project that you guys have heard about before. And so ours will be coming in first, or so, sorry, their project. Well, our project will be coming in first, but it's still a little up in the air exactly how timelines will align. Next slide.
But they will align.
They will align.
They will all work out together somehow.
Yeah. So these are existing pictures of the south end of the project near Dry Gulch. This is actually Wells. And so then you're kind of, the water quality enhancements will be right on the other side of that fence. We'll be redoing that fence, and then we'll be adding in curb. We'll be redoing the wood fence. Yeah, that's perfect. And then we'll be adding in curb and gutter right there, just to kind of clean this up a little bit and fix that drainage. This is kind of a very generic schedule. So the problem with these general storm projects is that when there's multiple projects involved, sometimes it's kind of up to the contractor what they do first. So we don't always know exactly what the construction schedule will look like. But right now we're planning on a 2023 construction. Before construction starts for our project, there's a couple of things that need to happen. The Excel gas needed to move, and so you might have seen Stuart Street was actually closed in the last couple of months. That's because Excel was in there moving their gas line, and they should be pretty close to done with that work. And then the second thing that needs to happen is Denver Water is coming in and they're replacing their all the lead services on this street so that they can get that done before we come in. And so if you live on Stuart, you might have gotten a flyer. I know they were flyering just this week. So they're starting, Denver Water is starting that work in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be complete by this fall. So lots of things going on in preparation of this storm project that you might see. And then again, once we have a contractor on board, then we'll come back to you guys with a more specific schedule. But right now, all we can really communicate is that construction will probably occur in 2020. Well, it will occur in 2023, whether that's early 2023 or late 2023. It's kind of up in the air. The work in the Gulch will need to be done during low flows. So winter time. There's also a water line that we have to cross under that needs to be done in the winter. So yeah, Heidi.
So fun being one of the few people on here that's from the community. I get to gobble up all the time.
Yeah, go for it. Take advantage of it.
I will. So I'm just curious, like, I'm not really sure. I don't know a lot about this project as far as how, I'm assuming that there's existing water, like the pipeline under there just needs to be replaced or whatever that is.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I can provide a little more background on the why. So there's not an existing storm sewer in Stuart Street right now, nor is there a huge flooding problem on Stuart Street. The issue is more on Colfax. The Colfax system is undersized and needs more space. So what we're doing is we're diverting flows from Colfax and taking them to the Gulch. So currently there is flows will flow east on Colfax, and then there's, I believe, Lowell is where it cuts down and goes to Dry Gulch. Now we're just kind of intercepting it and taking it to Dry Gulch a little bit sooner. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And so I'm just curious, water is such a big thing, and also like wastewater and moving things around and piping things and just sort of plopping them into our water systems. I'm wondering if anything was evaluated or looked at as far as combining other ways to slow spread and sink the water from around Colfax. I think we see a little bit of that in
green infrastructure.
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah. So ideally, we want water to infiltrate before just piping it to a gulch. Let's see. The reason we're not doing it right here, I think, is because we have a separate green infrastructure group at the city, and they kind of have high priority areas, and it wasn't necessarily a good option. There wasn't any opportunity really to add in anything like street side planters here. The roadway, Stuart itself is just it's a little too narrow. Like you could, there wasn't a great opportunity to add in street side planters in front of the inlets. And there's not like an open channel there. We do have, as part of this project, a trash vault right at Stuart and Wells. It's all underground, and that'll help collect trash. And all this will go to Dry Gulch then before it goes to the Platte. So we do have an open channel in there first, rather than just piping into the Gulch. There just wasn't funding, and it wasn't as high priority enough to add in green infrastructure components to this specific project. It's not the greatest answer, but hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Let's see. Should we go to the next slide? Okay, so during construction, there will be a trail detour from Raleigh to Tennyson. It's kind of nice we have those bridges at Raleigh and Tennyson, so that makes the detour pretty easy here. And then the contractor will work one block at a time. So if you live on Stuart there or drive through Stuart, there will be just one block closed at each time. And then that work in Colfax will require some lane closures. All work will be done within the existing right of way. There will be some impact to landscaping in the right of way, driveway aprons, things like that. That's right along the road, just because we will be replacing that curb and gutter and adding inlets. But all of that will be replaced in kind, and the contractor will work with those homeowners to do so. And then business access on Colfax will be maintained. Next slide. And then this is just contact info. So I'm the design project manager with the city. Jacobs was our designer. Their contact info is here as well. And then during construction, we've got a construction project manager, Paul, and then the inspector is Gary, and he's the one who is out on site all the time. And if you live on Stuart and need access or need through or something, he would be the one to contact. But again, we'll be coming. So construction's still a ways out, and we don't have an exact schedule. So we'll be coming out to you again before construction starts with that schedule, when we know who the contractor is, when we have their contact info. So just stay tuned. Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, could I ask a question about kind of like the trail closure and just between Raleigh and Tennyson and the way that the like one block at a time kind of interacts? So, like I'm imagining, so Perry Street Station is my closest light rail station, and I go pretty often. And most of the
Okay.
time, what I do, of course, is just to go down to that trail and walk along there. Is there like, it's not that hard in my head to say, oh, well, I guess I'll just walk along 13th until I get to Raleigh and then kind of dive down, which I think is another spot you have access. So, there's a bunch of access to the trail there. But is there any moment, would there be any moment when like, okay, they're doing reconstruction between 14th and 13th, and it's also closed down at the trail. And so then you have to, that becomes kind of a big jog around on Colfax to go, because I never really like to walk along Colfax just to go down to Perry Street Station. Asking about my
Right.
preference, asking about my favorite way, but I was just wondering how those two things, closing the trail and the block by block closures, kind of interact.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can talk to our construction PM and see if we can ensure that, like, when the trail's closed, 13th is still open. I mean, that would fall within the one block, like Wells to 13th would be closed. They would probably keep like through 13th open while they have Wells closed. Like that's how that would work. So therefore they'd be done with that trail work by the time they closed 13th. Is how that would work in an ideal situation. But I can talk more to the construction PM and inspector and have them work with the contractor to make sure that that happens. And then I think I should have looked at the trail. We have a trail detour drawn up that I'm not remembering exactly how it goes at the moment, but I think that it crosses to the south. I think it has people crossing the bridge to the south and then on the south side of Dry Gulch, then coming back up. Would that make sense?
Well, I mean, it doesn't, in my daily life, it won't like, get me too bad, but it does make sense in my head that if you're walking kind of from the West Colfax part of the neighborhood to go to Perry Street Station, and it really is a toss up. I guess I could just as easily go to Sheridan, or pretty easily go to the Sheridan station, but it makes more sense to me that you end up kind of walking along 14th or 13th, like through the neighborhood, than to cross the Tennyson Street on the south side and then cross back up, especially too, because, it's pretty busy with cyclists, which is also me, along that south side of the hill, and cyclists mostly don't, come along the north side of the Gulch. So that's mostly what I was thinking. Like, okay, my personal.
So I think, I think that falls within that one block. Like if Wells is closed, then 13th will be open, and so therefore that you're covered when the trail is closed. 13th will still be open. So I think you're probably covered there, but I can make sure that happens.
Thank you so much. I had another question too about Wells. You showed the picture of like the current condition from Tennyson to Stuart along Wells, and you mentioned that there'd be a new fence. Is the city also going to be putting in like a curb along that along Wells, the south side of Wells there?
Yes, the south side of Wells will have a curb. Yeah, right where the like wood posts and beam fences. Yeah, that'll be replaced with a new similar style fence, and then the curb. There will be curb and gutter in here. And there will also then in the other picture, so the picture on the right is Tennyson, and then the picture on the left is Stuart. So both of those will have curb and gutter.
And then I'm not the person to say, here's another project you all should do at the same time. But one other project that is happening is that like the north-south connection ends up being across the bridge on Tennyson and then takes you up Tennyson until you get up to 16th. Then you're supposed to jog over and then go through Utica. So, it's, I think a problem area that everybody identified when they were looking at the bike connection on 17th is this particular like drainage, this curb. So there's just a note there that like at some point down the road, this would also be apparently a really key piece of bike infrastructure. And so whatever kind of lands you at the bottom of the hill going down Tennyson onto the bridge to cross the bridge as bike infrastructure, just something to kind of consider a synergy and interaction between your project and something else.
We are working with parks they're included in this design is redoing that ramp there. So hopefully that will help make it a little easier. And then I do think that there is a proposed bike project along Tennyson that I don't have much detail on.
I ended up making a longer comment than mostly. I just mean to bring it to the awareness that
I think it's a great comment. I think that is, I know it's not specifically related to Lauren's stormwater improvements, but it is related to the coordination among all the projects that are going on in the area. So it's definitely something we can just ensure. I think that the bike folks are aware of and thinking this through, but it's just a great reminder just to kind of pull all these folks together.
And then I saw Heidi had a comment in the chat about green infrastructure right here, and that water quality improvements that I mentioned earlier. So Beth, if you want to go back to the slide that shows just the map, like the second slide, this one, So these water quality enhancements, those are green infrastructure essentially. So right where, right at the Wells and Tennyson intersection where that curb ramp is. So if you go onto the south side of that fence, there's kind of like a swale there. We'll be adding in some boulder drops and kind of making that swale a little bit more defined. And so that itself, that acts as a water quality or green infrastructure component too. And then the same thing will happen on the east side, right at like between Raleigh and Stuart. That swale will kind of be cleaned up a little bit, and there will be some boulder drops. It'll act as a water quality component to filter that water before it infiltrates into the ground.
Yeah. Does Denver allow curb cuts for water?
Yes,
To do what? For what, Heidi? Sorry.
So the water doesn't have to jump over a curb. So basically you put a cut so that you find where the water goes, and then you put a cut in so that it doesn't just, you know what I mean?
So and we will be regrading right at Stuart and Wells. We'll be regrading all that so that it drains. It's not necessarily a curb. There won't necessarily be a curb cut, but it will be regraded to drain down into that area.
Thank you.
If that makes sense.
All right. Hey, we are right at 7 o'clock. So we're doing pretty good. Does anyone have any last questions for Lauren? I'm just going to flip us forward. And I think that is everything.
I did have a quick question for you, Lauren. This is Eugene.
Yeah.
You might have said this, and I apologize if I missed it. The Stuart Street project, roughly, how long do you think that project might last from when it starts and when it starts
to finish? We have, I think the contractor's limit is a year.
Okay.
I don't anticipate it'll take that long.
Okay.
But I do think each block, I think, what did that slide?
That's good enough.
That was 2 to 3. Oh, not the next one.
Yeah.
Did that say on there how long per block?
Oh, that's okay. That gives me a general idea.
I think it was like a couple, like it could be a month to 2 months per block. So it's not quick just because it's a deep, big storm sewer system.
Mm-hmm. Super. Thank you.
All right. So in theory, our next meeting would be on August 4th. But as Rebecca mentioned at the beginning, we're actually thinking to cancel our August meetings. And if that is good with everyone, it just kind of deals, a lot of folks in the beginning of the month go on vacation, and then school starts the second half of the month. So that was our thinking. But we should mention that we're also due for a community-wide, a public meeting, not just our small CAG group. And so we would be looking to push that into September and have that be the meeting in September. So we don't have an agenda for that yet, but I'm sure we'll have updates on a number of projects at that time. and potentially some more information on the West area plan as well. So that we would just sort of skip August, but move into September with a pretty full community-wide meeting. All right.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for attending, everybody.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Good night.
Okay,
Thank you.
good night.